guys. Oh, I hit the button too short. Oh well, what you gonna do? Welcome to episode 128, and welcome to this adventure we're about to go on, an outdoor adventure. I wish I had more sound effects so I can just play some water or something, but I can't. Well, there's water. But yes, let's get right into the episode. All right, guys, we're just gonna jump right into this because him and I have been talking, and he thought we were recording, and we weren't. We were just having fun, and so. But here's another person I found off a Podmatch and read his story, and again, the podcast started off at a certain direction of strictly people with disabilities and stuff, and a lot of other subject matter came out of it, and it's just like I said, now it's more about people just overcoming and just going through the shit and seeing what can come out on the other side, and so. Looks like we're meeting a new friend. So you want to introduce yourself and obviously tell a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Mike Martin. I am the host of Project Mindfully Outdoors, the podcast as well. It's also a writing project. I am also the author of a book called No One is Beyond Redemption, and it's never too late to return yourself. Let's see. I have had probably the craziest, actually, as a good friend of mine, River Horse, put it, the biggest wallop that life can give you in the past 3 years of my life story, which has caused me to go from being a victim of mental illness and losing everything around me to undertaking one of the probably most intense and greatest moments of my life, which was an outdoor-based healing journey. And it's been one of those situations that has not only brought me forward, but taught me so much about myself, the world, and the connection to the place that I love the most, which is the wilderness.
Yeah. So about what time frame was around when everything kind of went to shit?
Well, we're talking probably right before the onset of COVID.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah, it was where I found myself facing my second divorce, completely homeless, living in my truck. About the only thing to my name was things that I could keep in my truck. And pretty much on the verge of giving up. I had tried and had a botched attempt. And then woke up the next day from that, completely blank and just carrying on with life. And I stumbled across Marcus Aurelius through a podcast. Ryan Holiday was on the Hunting Collective, and he was quoting countless different quotes from Marcus Aurelius that when I heard them, I was looking in my rearview mirror, and I realized, the last thing that was spoken to my face about how I was nothing, I had nothing left to offer my family, and that's why I had nothing, was not the narrative or the way that I wanted to live. So when I heard the quote about how adversity is an opportunity to showcase what is truly deep within you, it's something that's hidden, is your true character.
Yeah.
It hit me in a way that I said, you know what, I've got to do something.
Right.
And from there, I actually ended up later on that day at the bookstore picking up Meditations and spending weeks inside of that trying to understand how I could connect with the world around me and live in this new reality that I had never asked to be thrown into.
Yeah. Now your suicide attempt, what did you do? Just take pills? How did you try to end it?
Well, the other place that I was spending my nights was an old deer blind that I used to hunt at.
Okay.
And following those words being spoken, I grabbed a big old bottle of pills. I went back to the deer blind, and this was, late February, early March, so it was still pretty cold. Between either not taking enough pills and not catching hypothermia and dying or whatever, I woke up that next morning, fortunately, because the way that I see it is when that happened and I woke up, my attempt wasn't to kill me. It was to kill the person that was living in their old reality because, reality is what you make of it. I couldn't, in that frame of mind, make a productive reality for myself. So the change had to happen, and that's just how it manifested and how I registered it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, what's that like? Because I tried many years ago too, and the coming to terms where you kind of just let that guard down. Because there's that whole like double dutch type thing where it's like, is it my turn? I'm gonna jump in, my turn, go, and you're like, you just can't come to do it. You can't jump in the game. You're like, I can't kill myself. Like there is something to live for, but at some point, that kind of whole that thing just falls apart, and you're just like, well, how, like, you get to a breaking point and you're like, I'm done. Like, I can't.
Well, see, the thing about suicide that a lot of people miss is it's not necessarily the person wants to die, because there's a book that I can't recall the title of it off the top of my head, but it was revolving around a study where they asked all these different suicide survivors, why'd you do it? Did you really mean to die or whatever? And their answer, all of them, was I wanted to live. I just didn't know how to deal with what I was going through. So in reality, suicide isn't, the technical stigmas and labels and thoughts put out there. It's
right.
a breakdown of the coping system.
Right. Yeah. A lot of it's also about just wanting the thoughts and the voices and everything to just stop. It's
right.
It's not.
See, I could take you further back into my past.
Okay.
Because growing up, I was a cutter, and
you were
self-harm, a cutter. I self-injured.
Gotcha. Right.
And that was my coping mechanism. It was kind of like my last defense before everything was just gone. The urges, the idealization, all that would come up, and if nothing else would work, I would resort to self-harm in order to get it out of me. When I gave that up, I had somehow managed to find other ways to fill it, and then when that reality and all those different fillers were gone, and all I had was myself, I had no way to manage those idealizations and ideas. Therefore, without reverting back to the self-harm, it was just the most logical way to make it all stop.
Yeah. Yeah, when you can kind of quiet everything, that's really what helps. But I mean, people have their own methods of, like one thing that helped me back in the day was like multitasking, distracting my mind with so many things that I couldn't focus on that one thing that is just gnawing at me, or the thing that is trying to make me afraid of. But, and again, sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. Everybody has their methods of exercise and whatever else it is. Sure, whatever it does distract you from it, you just got to, because, again, I think I said everyone has a breaking point. It's just most people don't ever see it.
And I, in those moments, we kind of lose sight of the fact that, it's only one single moment, regardless of if it lasts 10 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, a week, even. It's one single moment, and it's going to pass.
Yeah.
You just have to crawl your way through to the next moment.
Yeah. And I always use the analogy, because they make it seem like you need to have something so important in your life to hold on to. And it's like, oh, you have a loved one, or, even, of course, a pet or something. And that's great, but not everybody has that. And there's a lot of people that literally are alone. And that's why I said, sometimes you need to have, let's say a Netflix show or something. You're like, oh, I can't wait for season 3 of something to come out. And it's like, it's coming out in a month. It's like, well, that's a month that you want to live. And so then who knows what happens within that 30 days. Then maybe that show comes out and they go, oh, now we're re-ing up for season 4. And now you want to live for another year.
Yeah.
Again, it sounds very stupid and basic, but really, like, you don't. We all would love to have our significant other. We would all love to have amazing friends, and we would have some money and a nice place to stay, and all. That all sounds great. But a lot of people don't have that shit, and people have to hold on to the littlest of things. Like you said, you were homeless. What do homeless people have to hold on to? They have things, but it's not the same things that an average person who lives in a middle class family have.
Well, I want to start to walk down that question right there,
Sure.
because for me, living in that moment, being homeless, in fact, I've been there twice along this journey. And there's a quote by Heracles that Marcus Aurelius refers back to a lot in Meditations. You never step twice in the same river,
Right.
because, we've all been through these situations,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like we're starting over or we're just point blank lost. Well, each time that you encounter the situation, you're really not starting over. You're meeting it with the skills, the attributes, the different techniques that you utilized to get through it last time. It's like, as we had this conversation, I'm actually standing here on the bank of the Huron River doing some fishing. And it's a local place. It's one of my favorite spots to come. But when I come here, it's never identical, because, I'll see a fish jump one trip who won't be there the next, or there's just be something. Maybe the color of the trees are different.
Mm-hmm.
That does is it illustrates the momentum of the change that evolves in the world. And we all have a connection to that momentum, to that life force. And if we can grasp onto that, it really will help empower you and lead you through. But then there's also another quote that I carry with me so much, the fact that I've written it on the dashboard of my truck, is no matter where you live, you can live well. So that means if I'm living in my truck, I'm sleeping in the deer blind, whatever it is, I can make that mine. I can make the best of it. I can be happy. I can be fulfilled in that. You mentioned about wanting this, wanting that. Those are all things that through time, persistence, work, and everything else, you can achieve. However, at the moment that you're standing in, you didn't have them at the moment before. So if you don't have them in the moment that you were in, but you were good 2 minutes ago, you can still be good in that moment without them. It gives you something to look forward to.
Right.
You don't have to get caught up in that mask of craving something, because when you do that, then you become a slave to it, and you lose that freedom and that sense of adventure in the moment.
Yeah, you don't appreciate the journey.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to. Like I said, there's, and some people's realization isn't the same as yours, and again, we all need to be grateful for what we do have. But
the gratitude thing is actually one of the greatest places to start one of these healing journeys, because if you can look at even the little things and just be happy that they're there. Like for me, one of the simplest things is the fact that I get up and I've got a cup of coffee.
Right.
I'm grateful for that. Or I'm grateful for the fact that I have an idea that I can write about. Right now, I'm extremely grateful for the fact that I'm standing here on the bank getting to celebrate this conversation with you through fishing and obviously having the conversation.
Right. Well, I'm sure being homeless probably taught you a lot too, of just being able to have gratitude for things, because when you actually do have a place to stay, and you don't have to try to go to shelters or ravage for food or whatever you had to do in those moments, like you actually can go home and sleep, and you have the simple things, a ceiling fan, heat, things that a lot of people don't appreciate.
See, for me, the take is a little bit different.
Okay.
Because, there's the fact that there's no physical address, and I'm technically homeless, and, my truck isn't considered a shelter. However, being an outdoorsman, I've got a lot of those survival type skills that I can rely on. Like, really, if I didn't have a truck, I'd be able to figure out a place to sleep and sleep comfortably. I've always got the ability to make warmth, find food, whatever it is. And on top of that, I have, I keep a regular job. So I work two jobs between a day job and, the creative stuff.
Okay.
So it's not as harsh as, say, somebody that is having those challenges that they can't grab, they're just there.
Right.
So it is a bit different. And I'm probably fortunate enough to have more things to fall back on.
Yeah.
But there are obstacles. And yeah, it does change your perception about things because, I can take like TV, for example. 3.5 years ago, when I had the old life that I had, TV was a regular thing in my life. All of us watch TV. Now, I haven't actually watched TV in probably almost 3 years. And when I do turn it on, and I'm like, I kind of miss having turning the TV on. I can't connect with it. I look at it and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time, which is something that I've really learned along this process, is to enjoy each moment and to make it the fullest, most joyful experience. Because, once it's gone, and the next moment isn't something that's guaranteed to us.
No. Yeah, I mean, you can put that in perspective of just people in your life. Like, one day they're there and the next day they're not. And you could look at that for whatever it is that you cherish in life. At some point it's going to break or it's just not going to be there. And you just got to appreciate the times you have it. Like this microphone I'm talking into, at some point this mic's going to break, or maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Or I'm just...
Well, to think about it in the sense of an individual perspective. In fact, I'm glad that your listeners are enjoying this conversation and gaining a lot of perspective out of it, because in the process of gaining all that, you're trading this moment. You're moving one step closer to death,
Right.
And that was something that, to really fully understand it, I can give you another example. Is a few weeks ago, I sat down and recorded a conversation for my show, which ended up airing about 2 weeks after the conversation. Well, in the course of that 2 weeks, the guy passed away.
Wow.
And when we had the conversation, he was battling what clearly was going to be life-ending cancer. But he was so motivated by his message and, leaving this kind of legacy, that throughout the hour and a half I spent with him, it was all forward thinking and projective and, happy as could be, because he was getting to live his element in that moment. He was getting to celebrate exactly what he was on this earth to do. And that's something that we all should be drawing the inspiration from, and be joyful about what we have in living those moments to their fullest.
Yeah. Yeah, you wanna like go out when you die. You wanna have something to put back into the world. You don't wanna,
right?
We all want to be known for certain things, and whatever happens, whenever they put on our tombstone, whatever. But you want to be able to leave something for someone else so they can carry on. It's all about putting more seeds in, and you can do it. But again, as a person, going through mental health, sometimes it's hard to be overly positive when your life isn't going the way you imagined it. But
well, that's where I kind of draw back on that quote about how you take that view of everything's unfortunate because I have these obstacles. No, it's not unfortunate that you have those obstacles. Those obstacles are actually part of the way, and they're a part of the path, which is just simply the path. That's the story that you lead and that you're living, that you're writing. So it is fortunate because that's what makes you unique. And that's where I think a lot of professionally the emphasis gets put on that term mental health or whatever branch they want to, label you with. And there's so much emphasis in there. There's not enough emphasis put on the fact that this is just your set of obstacles. Every human being throughout the course of time has had obstacles. It doesn't matter what they look like at that point in time for them. They made the most of it, and you can too, because that's written within your DNA. By being alive, you are entitled to living the most fulfilling life that defines you, that you're happy and you're content with. It doesn't matter what's put on your plate. Those things on your plate, just like food, nourish the story.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So with having that conversation with that guy and obviously having, I guess, kind of a near-death experience, are you afraid to die?
Absolutely not. And the reason I say that is because I've gone through and I've balanced the books of my life. I've made all the amends that I need to make. I've also come to terms with the fact that I live in the moment now. I got my value system that I live by, which is a combination of my family being my children, my passion for the outdoors and adventure, and being a creative force that delivers messages and things to people that can help inspire them. So contributing to the greater good, I guess you could say. Yeah. And when you find that connection and that tone within yourself, you get on this frequency that when it ends and you close your eyes, take your final, and you look back, you do so being happy. You can't crave and long for the things that aren't here yet. And if it's not here yet, then you don't even know that it exists. But on the same hand, if when that moment comes, or you think about that moment, you got to realize when you're dead, that means that you can't do whatever it is you're doing in that moment. So if you're wasting that moment, then there's no point in anything going forward. So making the most of it and spinning things and making that fire grow bigger, then there's nothing to regret in.
Right. Well, I think what makes you so unique, and you're not the only one, that there's other people out there that are similar to you in their way of thinking and living. But we have this, like, especially in this country, we have this whole like white picket fence and family, and it's a generic way of a goal that we all should strive for. But that's not everyone's realization, and everybody has different thoughts, and they've lived their lives. Some people have struggled more. Some people have just had it easier. But it's great when you see people who are just their own, they're their own individual. They do their own way. And like, there's so many ways. I think why it's great to have these conversations, because everyone thinks that you have to have this certain way of doing things, and it's not. There's many ways to living your life. There's many ways to combating, mental health. There's many ways of just feeling free. And there's an argument to be made that there's some of the freest people in the world are homeless people. Some people believe that, some people don't, but it's everybody has their own perspective. Everyone lives differently. And if we stop trying to live within this box and always think the same way, like what you're doing, I think we'll be in a better place, because there's so many people they think they have to think a certain way. There's either left or right, like there's either Republican or Democrat. There's either this or that. Like, you have to be one or the other, but there's not many books or scripts to show you, hey, there's a third, there's a fourth, there's a 17th way of doing things. It's just, it may not be common to you. It's unique, but it's not the most common way of thinking. But there's other options. You just don't know it yet.
Well, that's the ironic part about that, is with all the different packaging and there being the left, the right, and this is kind of like the way it was taught. Thinking outside the box is just a more creative version of the exact same dogma that they're teaching you growing up. You
Yeah.
know, you got to have that white picket fence. Well, you know what? For me, that white picket fence is sitting here on the bank, surrounded by trees right now, watching a group of ducks go through and do their thing and seeing what I can learn and how I can adapt that,
Yeah.
which is no different than, you know, somebody standing in their yard pushing a lawnmower up and down that white picket fence.
Yeah.
It's all about the perception. It's all about the willingness to look inward, explore, and find exactly how you fit into things.
Yeah.
How that dynamic looks for you that makes you feel most comfortable.
Yeah. And we just have to stop looking at other people's situations and going like, ill. Like, no, you have to,
Right.
because what you're happy about, if you're just sitting in your house and you're petting your dog and that makes you feel good, okay, great, but no one's judging that. Like, let them do their version of petting their dog. Like, whatever it is, if exercise is your thing, going to the gym makes you feel good about yourself and makes you feel invigorated and happy, great. But no one's telling you not to do that. But there are people that do some completely opposite things, and it's like, that's their work, that's their happiness. Obviously, if you're not hurting people or animals, and you're just doing something good for you, and it makes you a better person, makes you happy, like, who cares if it completely goes with your ideologies and it's your way of thinking? It's different, and different is good. It's, you don't have to be the same. That's what's gross. Like, we all want everyone to just be these mindless robots and let's all think the same way. But it's like, no, like, I'm not a super religious person, but there are people that have used God to help them get to where they got to, and they are now happy, they live good lives, and they do great things in this life, and they help people. So just because I don't necessarily believe in everything that they believe in, doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just that's how they got to their top of their mountain, quote unquote. Uh, a different way, but they got there. So what? Like, I'm envious of someone who made it and is happy, because I struggle with it every day. And so I'm always envious of people like you who are just different, and you do great things, and you found your happiness.
Well, you know, happiness, and no matter how you go about getting there.
Yeah,
For you personally, brother, there's nothing to be envious about.
fair enough.
I used to think that same exact thing, where, you know, it's like I'd talk to somebody and I'd be like, man, you got it going on, dude. You got everything happening. And here I am with all these different struggles. Okay, the thing about it is we all have our struggles at every minute of the day. You know, we're all feeling things, we're all going through stuff. That's just life, and that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you should celebrate, and you should enjoy those struggles and those different things that you're working through. You don't compare yourself to somebody else, because, you know, you don't know what's going on in the background, for one. For two, that's not your life, your situation, therefore there's no reason to have an opinion about it. And number three, you got to be you. Your path is different than somebody else's path, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's understanding and finding the acceptance that the path is the path. It's always unique. Is where you then become comfortable with the fact that your path is your way, and then you embrace that and you build upon that. That becomes your foundation. And I can tell, based on our conversation that we've been having today, along with the few messages we've exchanged, the fact that you do even do this podcast and why you put it out there, your motivation, is telling me that you are getting closer and closer to that acceptance.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that you should be commended for. That's something that we should be celebrating right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, well, that was what we were saying off mic, is just about evolving, and and you're talking about like talking to other people and like what you've done with your show, and going over all these different subject matters and just what you get to learn and see other people's perspectives. And yeah, you see what other people are going through, and you just go like, wow, like, you start to appreciate the things that you do have. Because, I've interviewed people with many different types of disabilities and ailments, and my problem is my eyes. But I've interviewed people with problems with their ears and their feet and so on. And it's like, man, like, it's not that I feel I'm not better than them by any stretch of the imagination, but I am appreciative that I can walk. I'm appreciative that I can hear, and then I look at my eyes and go, yeah, it sucks, but I have these other things to be thankful for, and those are things I didn't think of before because I just was like, yeah, it sucks, my life is terrible, blah blah blah, woe is me. But at some point, I've come to realize and just like love the things that I do have, and so yeah, like I'm still kind of in the like I'm in the middle of this journey, but I'm getting closer towards happy land than where I was. Because I mean, in many years ago, not many, but maybe 10 years ago, I was in a really really bad place, and I think that dark cloud still surfaces over every so often. I have my moments, but I'm more I've gotten a hold of my problems and my anxiety and all that more so now than ever before.
Yeah. See, what you just said there, I can completely identify with because, you know, every healing journey is born out of a storm. And as the rain starts to stop and, your body starts to feel cold because it's soaking wet, you instantly want to start building warmth. So you scramble around and you find some debris in order to make a tinder pile. And then you build your tools to begin to build a fire. And when you get that little ember inside that tinder pile and you start to nurture it towards a flame, you do so by breathing on it. And in the process of breathing, you begin to build a connection with your fire. And as that ember turns into a flame, then you start to feed it, sticks until ultimately you move up to a log. This is exactly what a healing journey is you start out with that little ember, you build the fire, and then everything around it that you experience, that you learn, that you're exposed to, that setbacks, the steps forward, it all becomes fuel for that fire.
Yeah.
And in the end, as you stand there next to that fire, your clothes are going to dry out, you're going to warm up, and you're going to grow, and you're going to grow into the human being that is more secure within themselves, more enlightened, more connected with themselves and the universe and with the world. And that's a beautiful thing. That's not something to be afraid of.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I used to be afraid, again, like I told you about off mic, and I've talked about it on here too, but just how I could have been that kid that shot up at school because I was just so afraid of everything, and I was afraid for a long
Right.
time. And then when I realized what anxiety was, like I was really petrified of everything. Even
Right.
even failing in school, having bad grades. Even at one point, I didn't care about that because I just thought I wasn't good enough to do anything. But when I finally
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, as you bring up that, the anxiety and things like that, talking to people, there's an interesting fact that I throw out at the end of all of my conversations after we're done. Is the fact that I started the conversation campfires as a way to deal with social anxiety and a phobia of interacting with people. And there's been a lot of times in the beginning that I fell on my face with it. And now here I am, a year later, 160 some episodes into it. And I've learned how to spread my wings because of practice and building a practice and committing to it really gets you through those steps that you were talking about.
Oh yeah. The journey. That's the thing. Like that's something I've really learned more in the last 5 years. Just appreciating everything I've been through, even the bad times. Even
Yes.
just being depressed and just sitting on the couch and being sad. But like then one of the things that I've I've come to learn about myself is how resilient I am. Because I've learned a while ago that I was a very strong person. You know, I told you some of the things I've been through, and you know that was just the tip of the iceberg. But I've been through a lot of shit, and I realized like at some point I was like, wow, like how are you still standing? Like you're still here. Like why? And not why is in
And
like
that's the cool part.
right. Not why is in like why won't you kill yourself, but like why? Like how are you doing this? This is amazing. I'm like an outer body experience. Like I'm looking at myself and I'm just like, you're still here. And when I was talking about the laying on the couch being sad, the one thing that I realized after I came out of that was like, oh, okay, that was only a few hours or that was only maybe a day. And now you're back up and you're happy and you're doing your thing again. And it wasn't like, you know, 10 years ago where it would consume me for weeks or months. Now it's like,
Right.
okay, you just recover quicker.
See, and that's the grip and grin moment that goes with hunting and fishing. You're out there and you're trying and you're trying and trying, and ultimately you score whatever your prey is. Pick up your phone and you snap a big old picture of you with a big old grin and that fish in your hand, and it ties together to that next low point.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're standing back out on the water and frustrated trying to figure it out, you can pull that picture back up and you can go, oh yeah, I did it then, I did it now, I can do it now.
Right.
And you gain the confidence out of that. You persevere and you have those super strong experiences that are on the other side of it, which is exactly what you described.
Yeah. Now, do you still have your moments of just sadness or, you know, anxiousness?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. Those always, those will never leave.
Yeah.
You know, that's a part of the human experience, and it ties back to our ancestors because that was one of the instincts that kept them alive, which is why we're here and we're having this conversation now.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the world has evolved and changed into the modern day world, we still have those natural instincts and receptors.
Yeah.
You know, if you're out in the woods and you see a bear, just like your ancestors did, you're going to think, hey, I should probably not be right here. I should probably get away because that's going to eat me.
Yeah.
And, you know, the depression and all those things are because those things never really evolved truly with the world. So we have to combat them. And we're going to have our triggers that are going to bring on, you know, the darker days and the darker moments. But it's developing a toolbox that you can carry with you to be able to get through them. You know, like I touched on earlier with the self-harm concept, I'll use that, building that toolbox, for example. You know, when I committed to, I was going to put that down and stop doing it, the first thing that I did was I replaced what I refer to as a tool with a red marker. So when the urges would come up, instead of actually going through the act of, you know, hurting myself, I would draw on myself. And then I grabbed a rubber band and I'd throw that on my wrist or whatever. And so ultimately, through training and honing those different little things, I started moving on to, you know, I'm having these urges. Let me go get a cup of coffee. Let me go for a walk. Let me do anything that gets me away from those little building blocks that I had gotten onto.
Right.
And through that process, you develop the healthier habits that work for you, that keep you away from those triggers or help you cope through those moments.
Right. And these tools you're talking about, like these are, you know, again, obviously it's an analogy, but the tools you use to help combat what you're going through based on what your emotions are and whatever you're feeling, you have certain emotional, whatever you want to say, tools that you pull out for those certain times to help you feel better.
Right. That's kind of like, you know, standing here fishing right now. I'm not going to hook a 30-pound trolling weight onto the end of my line because, number one, I'm not going to throw it very well. And number two, it's going to scare the hell out of everything around. So
yeah.
Instead of that, considering that there's not much going on right now, I've switched to a smaller, more finesse type approach because, number one, it's matching the environment and it's matching what's going on around me. It's about learning how to adapt and think through the process,
Hmm.
which brings up the idea of like mindfulness and Zen and meditation and all that. Through building that kind of a practice, you learn how to stay calm in the face of the stress or, you know, the more unhealthy impulses that we have, which lets you think through the process, almost like playing a game of chess. You're like, if I go with this more of an unhealthy approach, this is where it's going to lead me, and I'm not going to be very happy or proud of myself.
Yeah.
However, if I go the other way and say, I hook on a small little jig instead of presenting a big old crankbait right now, I'm going to feel proud that I made that kind of an adjustment because it kept me on track.
Yeah. Well, and you're at some point you realize like your mind is always ahead of you and is always trying to outsmart you. And the more experience you
Oh,
get
yes.
with this, you start to realize like, okay, I have to prepare for that. I have to put certain things in place. So I like, as an example for the podcast, there are times where I just don't feel like wanting to look for guests or record. Maybe I'm just sad or I'm whatever I'm dealing with. Or I also know with my eyes may fluctuate or certain things will just bother me that I know I just don't want to do it. So I get 20 down the road. I get a bunch, maybe it's a little more excessive and more than I need, but I get a decent amount done knowing that if I just don't feel like doing it, my mind is just like, screw it, why bother? I at least have episodes done and I don't have to go searching for somebody. I don't have to put much work in other than publish the episode and maybe do the description for the episode. But it's just to kind of
Right?
outsmart my brain, knowing that I know maybe it won't happen for the next 10 years, but I know it's still possible and it'll probably happen at some point that I know I might have a down day or a down week that I'm just like, okay, I prepared for this in one way or shape, in one way. But you have to prepare in many different ways and just keep trying to, learn and adapt. And, again, like with the mental health stuff we were saying, just how, you're not as sad as it doesn't last as long as it used to. Now it's a couple hours or a day, and that's how you combat it, how you fight it, and through that you realize like you find more things to be happy about, and even when you are happy and you do have a down day, you have these things in place to help you. And
Exactly. It's all about preparation.
yeah,
If you think about some of the handful of great leaders throughout history, there's not one moment that they were caught off guard because they were able to say, I didn't plan for that or I didn't expect that. And instead, they're always thinking ahead. They're always planning. They're always preparing. They're always contemplating what the next challenge is going to be and how they're going to overcome that, or they're going to, fight their way through it. And it's no different for us. Yeah, the context is a lot different, but it's the same theory. If you put in the prep work, you get those things prepared. When those more tough, difficult moments come up, you're going to be good. Another analogy that I could use, and I actually just wrote a pretty good piece about this, is when you go into the woods and, 9 times out of 10, when you're out there hunting in the fall and winter, it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet, it's going to snow. So you prepare yourself to be better equipped, to be more comfortable. You put on more layers and this and that. And then throughout the season leading up to opening day, you get out in the woods, you study, you hike around, you scout, you study maps, you study trail cams, all because you're trying to put yourself in the best position to be able to get that deer on opening day, no matter what the conditions are. And it's all a puzzle. We all have a puzzle that we live in life. To be able to put them pieces together is where the success and the continuing to move forward comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, it always sounds cheesy when you say take one day at a time, but you really have to. You can't really focus on the past. And you can't really focus on tomorrow because you just don't know if you're even going to be alive tomorrow. You have no idea.
Well, yeah, but in the end, the path is still the path
Right.
because it
Yeah.
still carries the same theme, and you're still wanting to go forward, and that's a beautiful thing.
Right. Right. Right.
Even in those difficult moments, there's still that fire inside you that propels you to go forward, which is beautiful.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I'm just saying sometimes we focus too much on one, and we don't
Yeah,
look at the now.
right. And again, those are all decisions, and it's about honing the decision process.
Yeah. So before we kind of get into what you're like up to now, I didn't want to kind of brush over it real quick. So what is your? And I know it's by choice, but what is your living arrangement right now?
Well, right now I'm kind of doing the nomad thing on the weekends because I'm a divorced father. So on the weekends that I have the kids, I make sure that we've got somewhere stable and good to stay and all that. Outside of that, I kind of bounce around between camp and truck and a friend or whatever. And it seems to be something that I found when I get back to that Heracles quote about the river, you never see the same river twice, or you never step into it twice the same. Originally, this was like the worst thing ever, but this time around, I really embraced it. I enjoy the freedom of it. So yeah, I keep the steady job. I make sure that all the normal priorities are met, but the rest of it, the rest of my time, man, I get to go out and adventure, just be and experience all this cool stuff that Mother Nature has to offer, or whatever fate throws in at my feet. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's probably the most freeing way that I've ever lived.
Yeah, well, it's good. And you have things to fall back on if you really needed to, but you're living the life you actually wanted, probably the life you never imagined you would be living, but you're living.
Well, in today's life and times, it's with all the high prices, it's a little difficult. But you know what, brother, we make it all work.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But I mean, but your like amenities are much smaller than the average person. Like you said, you don't need TV. Most people think if
Well, see, here's
their power shuts off, they're screwed.
right, and here's the ironic part about this because I've through this whole process, I've done talk therapy, right, and actually, probably 2 or 3 weeks before everything fell apart and I had to leave where I was staying with friends, I remember sitting in a session going, I feel like I'm really outgrowing my surroundings. Like, I don't feel like this is where I should be anymore. And then, 2 weeks later, I'm on my way home from work and I get a text saying, hey, you need to move out today. All right. I'm all over that. No big deal. And I'll tell you what, I feel like a lot of things have come off my shoulders. It's more like this is natural in the way that things are. This is the path, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, what do you teach your kids? Because obviously, this I'm assuming their mother lives what you would quote unquote be a normal lifestyle, but yours is unique to you. Uh, how do you go about being a good father and showing them an alternative way?
See, that's where everything gets really interesting because the other aspect of the lifestyle that I live allows me the freedom to always be there, which no matter what the situation is, when you have kids, that is the most important thing to teach them, is when they call on you, you will be there. That builds a sense of trust and it builds those dynamics for a healthy relationship, which is something that you have to foster. That's one of my true verticals is being able to build that. Now, as far as the teaching aspect goes, they know, number one, that commitment to being there is super important. They know that you value the things that you have and you live within your means. And that's what I do, is I live within the means of what feels right for me. They also learn to think outside the box and adapt because no two pictures need to look the same.
Yeah.
You need to do what works for you. So as long as you're carrying, your values and you're a productive member of the hive, as I say with the old bee analogy. But being able to do those things, then as long as you're living true to the values, then that's all that matters.
Right. So what is that's pretty cool. What is your kind of, I mean, I'm not going to ask you what your 5-year plan is, but where do you see yourself? Like, what are you trying to accomplish in the next so many years? Like, where, you know, because you seem to have found yourself and you found happiness. Where do you go from here?
That's the funny part is I could link back to another session of talk therapy where I was given one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever got is you don't need to know what's coming. All you need to do is allow yourself the grace to stand up and put one foot in front of the other. So that's been my theme, and everything that's come along the way that's been both positive or an obstacle has literally fallen in my lap because of it.
Yeah.
And I've learned to embrace that each of those come along because it's going to make me a happier, better person. And as far as where I'm going, I don't know. But you know what? I know it's going to be connected with the wilderness, my kids, and myself.
Yeah. No, because I asked that because, you know, there are people who actually reach the top of their mountain, if you will. And then it's like, well, now what? Where you're
Right.
kind of winging it. You're in the place you want to be, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and you're accepting that, and you're good with the uncertainty because the uncertainty is kind of it's the mystery of life. Whereas, like I said, some people they get to this place sometimes quicker than they ever imagined. It's like, oh, I just wanted to be a millionaire, and I just wanted to, you know, have girls all over me, and you're like, okay, well, you have that, but you're not happy.
Right, which is kind of the thing is there's an important word that you bounced around in there, and that's the word surrender.
Yeah.
When you surrender to, you know, the world around you and the flow, when you surrender to the flow state, you know, that like natural beat that's within each of us, that's where you're able to discover the more fulfilling aspects. When you're chasing something, unless it's a whitetail, of course,
right.
then, you know, 9 times out of 10, when you get there, it's not going to be fulfilling because there's not that real connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Each step of this has been, I've built it. And that's something that until I got smacked in the face with living in this new reality, I was never able to say. And now that I can embrace the fact that I've built this, man, I'm not afraid to walk in front of any situation, use my 2 hands to construct whatever it is that fate, you know, has inspired me to build based on the material that it gives
me. Yeah. No, like I said, I just love covering different perspectives, and I love, you know, people just owning and being themselves and living their life to the fullest, however they see fit and how they want to do it. And like I said, your way doesn't work for a lot of people, but that's okay. Just like some of, you know, my life or other people's lives don't work for you, and that's okay too. It's just however you get there, you get there. Just, you know, don't be a person that's evil and do horrible things to get to where you want to get to. And that's what a lot of people end up doing. They get to the top based on screwing over other people, but you're doing it in a natural way, and you're living, you're basically, you're just on a journey of finding the best version of you. Because you've seen the evil parts of you, and I think one of the good things with you and what I've done and some others, you know, you recognize the evil part of you, because a lot of people just want to act like they're all peachy and everything, like, oh, I'm not that bad, but we all have this other part in us that we're human. We do terrible, like every horrible disaster in the world. Most of it is created by us. And most of these animals being wiped out, and it's because of we continue to screw up, and we're selfish, and we do terrible things, and we all have it. We all have the ability to do something terrible. It's just life experiences and circumstances that happen, and a lot of people don't ever have to face it, which is great. But again, like the breaking point, and some people never will ever see their breaking point, and congratulations, good for you. But there's some of us
Right.
that do.
And you know what? We all get there different ways, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
That's the beauty of literally the world that we live in. It's wild. It's untamed, regardless of what it looks like around you.
yeah,
Being able to tap into it, find your little niche, and go is where everything. This is where it's at. That's the pulse right there.
for sure.
And when we talked about, or when you asked about what the plan is, and I mentioned how everything's just kind of fallen into place and it's being handed, given to me to deal with. The newest one that's come along from based on the work of the podcast and everything is I've started to lead and guide these outdoor healing adventures and journeys. So helping other people tap into nature and use the wilderness to tap into their self and discover how to heal and let these different things go is where I'm currently at. And then I've got the book, so having the book come out this year, that's going to
What's
be.
the book called again for people?
The book is called No One Is Beyond Redemption, and it's never too late to return, which is the story of me reconnecting with my daughter and building, a healthy and beautiful relationship with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, what we talked off air, just a lot of the shame and everything, and there's so much it'll eat you alive, and you have to address it. You have to deal with it, and there's gonna be a lot of uncomfortable, sad, angry moments. But once you kind of, as I've said many times before, there's a lot of beautiful things come from the darkest of places, and if you're lucky and fortunate enough to make it out of those dark places, that there's a lot of great things that come from it. And but on the same token, just because you're on this spiritual journey and you're happy and everything's great for you, doesn't mean everybody's going to accept your new journey. They're not going to accept your new. You might have caused a lot of damage that maybe you can't ever repair, but you can sure as hell try. It's also, once you are able to accept yourself, it's great and it's powerful. And that's why we have to get to a place where we have to just appreciate people for their own individuality. And we have to there are people who are really apologetic. They do some screwed up shit. And, we have to accept that because everybody screws up. And it's...
Well, I think there's a subject that it would actually be worth stopping the bus and exploring a little bit is the idea of forgiveness. Yeah. Because I had this conversation a while ago with Kellen Flugerty, and he shared a lot of different stories and perspectives on forgiveness. And after I got out of the conversation, I kind of, flipped my nose about it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. That's got nothing to do with me. I'm angry. I'm bitter. I'm, all this and that. And your story about how you hurt your puppy got his leg hurt when he was little and lived the rest of his life never angry at you and this and that from a horse and around incident has nothing to do with it, right? And fast forward about 4 or 5 months later, I meet up with Kellen again, and we're having our conversation, and all of a sudden I say the words, you know what? I forgave myself out of nowhere. And, continued on. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I just said that? Me, of all people, who is going to carry this bitter, I am angry, I hate this and that, until the day that I finally die. Just admit it out loud to somebody else that I forgave not only myself, but everything that, triggered all of those different events.
Yeah.
And the rocks that fell out of my backpack instantly made my shoulders so much lighter. And I can't exactly explain to you the whole process because, like I said, it was something I didn't want to think about, but I did. And it wasn't about going up to each individual person and saying, you know what, I'm sorry that, or I forgive you that, you did this and that to me. It has nothing to do with that. It's
Yeah.
about looking inside and being like, you know what, I forgive that person for or I forgive myself for letting that person's actions affect me that way.
Yeah.
And even more so, I forgive myself for the actions that I projected on somebody else that may have caused them to feel the same way that you were feeling.
Yeah, you
And to be
unpacked a
able
lot of your
to,
grudges and baggage, and
right,
you just loved them and said, you know what, screw it. Because I've made amends with some people as well, including my father and a few others, and it does feel good, even if it's never going to be the same. It's just good to not hold that anger anymore.
absolutely. And I think that, getting to that process, because we all think, if you forgive something, you have to go up and verbalize to that person,
Yeah,
or that person has to have their ramifications. Like, for example, with my second divorce, I got thrown off to the side of the road with nothing except for my truck and what I could throw into it while she ran off, did her thing. And I thought that really to forgive that, I would have to, or to let that go, I would have to see the same ramifications. I
hmm,
don't care. It's not my place to have that opinion or be the judge, jury, and the executioner about it.
yeah,
My life went down a different path, and that path is something that is so much greater than it ever could have been along the original line. So, to really, if you're really seeking that trigger of getting revenge, of seeing revenge happen,
yeah,
make that revenge to not be that same person that did that thing to you that you're carrying, that
yeah,
built the trauma that you're holding. Instead, let that trauma go and go forward along that new path, and let that new path make your world so much brighter.
yeah. You gotta let all the resentment go. My teacher used to tell me. She said, just like anytime someone would get on my nerves or something, she said, just don't let people run space in your head. And
Exactly.
and it's like, okay, and yeah, and you have to get to a point where, like, it feels good to reconnect, because there's a lot of times there's some stuff in the middle that neither of you addressed, or you just didn't have the open dialogue, the conversation that could have fixed this. You just went in your separate corners, and you just didn't talk about it, and it festered, and it just got worse, and time passed, and it just never was dealt with. And you still could have been friends through this, or whatever your relationship
Right.
could have been. It's just time, and time
But
is,
you know what, though? It's not even about the could have been, would have been, or any other label. I mean, I can kind of dig a little deeper into it. And in fact, it's funny because she's the mother of my son, so obviously I still have to have connection with her. And in my phone, her contact name is Corpse, because one of the first things that when I thought about where I was at, I drew on Seneca's words about how once you live a moment, you hand it over to death. So, obviously a corpse is dead and in the past, gone, whatever. And to be able to put that together, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I don't have to live with that stuff because when in my head I killed you out of my life in order for me to go forward, means that I went and buried all that stuff with you. I had the big old Viking funeral in order to burn all of those things. So to carry the ashes and the embers of it was stupid. It was kind of pointless and a waste of baggage. I could put something good in the backpack now. I could throw an extra canteen of water in there if I use an outdoor metaphor, or, whatever I allow that space to be filled by. All because that simple concept of what's been lived can never be lived again. You can never return to it in the same way that you have already experienced it. So
yeah,
it's not even worth holding on to or carrying. And
no,
that was one of the greatest pieces of wisdom I learned out of that.
yeah. And you can learn to appreciate the good things about her, even if it'll never be what it was, and you can still appreciate that she's a good mom and, whatever. There's good things about her. It just didn't work out. Some things just don't work out, and it happens.
Right.
And, maybe there's some bad things said and done, but it is what it is. It's over with. You hold on to that. Like you just never, again, you don't evolve. You sit in the same place and you stew and you can't, you got to get to a place where you hear someone talk about that person in whatever light, and you just go, okay, cool. Like if you think about you think about like your first ex-girlfriend and you were madly in love and it's like, oh my God. And imagine her ever being with another person or anything just broke your heart. But like now 30 years later, you're like, oh, I hope she's done well. Like I hope great things for her. Like you don't care, you just want good things. You don't care if whoever she's dating. Like there's no jealousy, there's nothing. It's because you're good with everything. You just let it unpack. So
you're living your life.
Yeah. So you want to promote the podcast one more time too, because I wanted people to support it and listen to it.
Well, absolutely. I would love to share my adventures and my healing journey and inspire your outdoor healing journey.
Yeah.
Which is what I do over on Project Mindfully Outdoors. And you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Audible,
right.
Amazon,
right.
And I think just about everywhere else that you can find a podcast in this world, we're there.
Well, yeah.
So camp is definitely open. And if the website, I guess I should throw that out there too, is projectmindfullyoutdoors.wordpress.com. And then what I also like to do is I like to throw out my email address. That way,
sure,
if maybe some of this is relevant and to one of your listeners and they want to reach out and further a conversation, I'd love to help out any way I can. And that's just simply projectmindfullyoutdoors@gmail.com.
Okay.
The book will be available sometime late this fall. And one more time, that's called No One is Beyond Redemption, and it's never too late to return.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know you wanted to do like a cross promote thing. You let me know how I can help you with yours. I hope we can keep in touch and be friends because I enjoy our conversation. And
most definitely, brother. This has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to celebrate my work.
Yeah, and I love what you do, and like I said, you're different, but I love that you're different. I love what you do, what you've overcome, and you can't take away what you've been through. And I guess I just
definitely.
I love when people take their pain and turn it into something great. And so yeah,
most definitely, and that's a decision that you make. And I love you, brother. I love you for your work and everything that you're putting out there. It's wonderful.
Buddy. Love you too. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Yeah. So I have to go get some food and some things done, but I'm gonna text you. We'll figure something out for your show.
Most definitely.
I thank you again for coming on, and like I said, we'll talk very shortly.
All right, man. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, buddy. Bye.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Oh, that ended so sweet. Everybody give each other hugs. So sweet. I'm not even being sarcastic. It's adorable. Including adorable. He's not going to contribute, but oh, there was a little noise. Oh, he yawned. He gave me a little lick. Oh, he is adorable. He's just, he had some questions, but he then took a nap. So I didn't get the questions from him. But yeah, what a good guy, man. I'm glad to get this one done. Thank you guys for being on this journey with me, with him, and with everyone else. And there's more to come. Again, find your place. We all come from different, even the last couple episodes, everybody's finding their place, their happiness and their top of their mountain in many different ways. And however you do it. Just don't hurt anyone or any animals while doing it. We all make mistakes. We all have setbacks. It happens. But please just keep up the good work, and then keep trying to find the best version of you. And as he was saying, like let go of the hatred for others. And there's some cases maybe you can't, but try your best to just make amends with anybody that is possible to make amends with. Please let that stuff go. I gotta go. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, bye, boy.